This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Hello and welcome to Anahita TV. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited about my guest today. His name is Sedric Collins, and he's an attorney. He's a trust attorney, and his company is called Legacy One Law. And he is a native Los Angelesian. He's from California, and he has a lot to share with us. So without further ado, welcome, Sedric.
How's it going, Anna? Thank you so much for having me this evening.
Thank you for joining me. I'm so excited to have you on, and your knowledge and everything you know about trust and law that excited me, the nerd that I am about these kind of things. I think a lot of people need to know this information. So I'm really excited to have you. And, you have an amazing background, and you are one of the first people in your family to have a doctorate or go to college. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm a first generation everything. So I was very fortunate to be a first generation college graduate and the very first person in my family to attend law school as well.
That's wonderful. Where did you go to law school?
Well, I went to Indiana University, Maurer School of Law. So I froze for about 3 years out there in the Midwest before returning here to sunny California.
Well, now you appreciate the beaches now, right?
Absolutely.
So give us a little background. I know that's a very small background about you. Give us a 1 minute, 2 minute background and how you got into law, because I know you were in entertainment law, you were in music as a music producer. I know you have a colorful background and how you ended up. So for our audience that's younger and they don't know what to do, I want them to know that a lot of us took our time figuring it out, and it just procurated into who you are today, and you're helping everybody in terms of trust and legacy and leaving a legacy for your family.
Absolutely. I'm happy to provide a little background. I kind of took several different paths to get to where I am today. I'm originally, though, just kind of correction from earlier, I'm originally from Florida. However,
Okay.
I've been here in Los Angeles since I was a teenager. And when I came out here, I didn't really have much vision, for my life. I had a couple odd jobs here and there, got some encouragement from some key people in my life to encourage me to go back to school and kind of get my business life and my education life in order. And so, but music was kind of the entry point for me. I was always been passionate about the music and about the arts. And at one time, yes, I did want to be a music producer. I played the piano, dabbled in a little songwriting here and there. I actually did a couple radio commercials a number of years ago in my living room in the home studio. But then the time I graduated, it was a really kind of tumultuous time in the music industry. And the music industry was in a bit of state of flux. So I decided kind of in my senior year to kind of make a hard pivot. And I can remember studying under a couple of entertainment attorneys at the university that I attended for undergrad. I went to the University of Colorado, and they had a really well put together music and entertainment industry studies program. So kind of in the 11th hour, if you will, I decided to pivot and go into law because I was really intrigued about from a legal and business standpoint, the music industry. So that's kind of what led me to go to law school. And I like to say trust in the states kind of found me, if you will. And maybe a little bit later, I can kind of discuss how I took that pivot from maybe entertainment law, which I still do represent some entertainment clients, but the bulk of what my firm does is trust in the states.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I have for you, I wrote some questions down. Let's see. So tell us why you were so interested in legacy law, and how did you get into that? What made you excited about this field?
Absolutely. Well, my very first job out of law school was actually for an in-house legal counsel for a small university. So I kind of come out of the higher education space, if you will. But unfortunately, after about 50 years of that university being in business, they had to close its doors. And I referenced some of this in my book. And it was a challenging time for me because so early in my legal career, I was at a crossroads. I had to make a decision. Was I going to go into corporate America? Was I going to, maybe find a job at a law firm or hang my own shingle? But around that time, there were several prominent entertainers that had unfortunately passed away. A couple of them were huge music icons. And I
Wow.
was really kind of perplexed that these individuals, despite their fame and their fortune, that they didn't have their basic affairs in order, not even a will or a trust. And that was the first thing that got my attention, if you will, about the need. And later I did research to learn that over 60% of Americans in general don't have any type of basic plan in place. So I saw that as a big opportunity to be able to serve the community. I had friends, family members, and colleagues that needed help. And that's in essence how Legacy One Law Firm was born.
Wow, that's amazing how that's a big number, 60%. And we hear it all the time. I mean, we don't all live forever and we don't know when we're going to go, which is good. That we don't know. But at the same time, not knowing, we still have to prepare. And I love that. Can you say some of those names or no, you're not allowed to?
Well, I don't even mention those names in my book, but they're Grammy award winning artists that if I did call their names, you would know very quickly. We've heard their songs on television and radio for years before their
Oh,
passing.
wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, they're pretty hard names to miss.
Definitely. And so this is what led you to write this amazing book that people can get. It's a very easy read. I highly recommend it for people who have questions and don't really know what legacy law is. And this really explains. So I started reading it and I learned a lot. It's a very good introduction to what you do. There we go. Yeah, it's prudent planning for family legacy. The truth behind Wills, Trusts, and States by Sedric Collins. So they can definitely, people can buy it on Amazon, correct?
Absolutely. It's available on Amazon now in both the hardback or paperback Kindle version, and soon it'll be available on Audible as well. For those of us who are stuck in that traffic out here in the West Coast, they can kind of learn about legacy planning on your drive or your commute into work as well. So that's coming soon on Audible.
I can't wait. I'm excited. So I'm going to dig in and, share your knowledge with us. My first question for you is, can you give us the big picture view of what state planning is about and why it's important?
Well, estate planning, we here at Legacy One Law Firm, we like to look at what we call comprehensive estate planning and planning for life as opposed to just planning for death. And
Mm,
so the documents themselves, they touch several points. You either have a will or a trust, which are kind of like maybe the chief cornerstone, the chief instruments in every estate plan, but they all also have several documents that support that will or trust, such as advanced healthcare directives, powers of attorney, final disposition instructions. And we mustn't forget about our children. So what happens in the event that parents pass away? The guardianship nominations. So we're a family focused firm, although we serve business owners and single individuals, but we make sure we touch not just what happens when someone passes away, but also what happens should they become incapacitated, who will make those essential decisions. So each of those documents make up that kind of your portfolio, your estate planning portfolio, if you will. And so estate planning is just basically making sure those who you love when you leave behind are taken care of and provided for, as well as the things that you've worked hard to build over the years. What's going to happen to the people that you love? What's going
right.
to happen to the things that you worked hard to build? And I always like to say to my clients and potential clients, if you don't have a plan in place, we're based here in California. The state of California most definitely has a plan in place for you. You might not like what it is though.
I think, yeah, there's a lot of taxes. How much of your taxes are gone? Let's just hear some realities.
I'm sorry.
What, how much of people have to pay taxes if you don't have a will, if you don't have a trust? Your kids, a lot of, I understand over 50% am I wrong?
I'm not qualified to give tax advice. Okay, so
Right.
I have to say that. But yes, estate taxes are very much a part of this process, depending upon the size of your estate. For example, there's not to get too deep into the weeds with the taxes, but the federal government does have something called an estate tax that's based upon the total value of your estate at the time of your passing. Right now, it's over $13 million for a single individual, and you get to double that if you're married. However, if your estate, the value of your estate, which are your estate, to kind of simplify things for our listeners and viewers, it's everything that you own, including the shirt on your back at the time of
Yeah.
your death, your real estate, your bank accounts, 401ks, life insurance, all of that can be included into your estate. And so if your estate exceeds a certain value, an appraised value, then you can be subject to 40% tax for every dollar that exceeds that threshold, if you will. And in my book, I do get into estate taxes and how you can kind of plan around that to kind of minimize or help mitigate some of that tax liability with proper planning.
Okay. Thank you for that question. Sorry, it was a tax question, but I feel like you had the right answer for us. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we touch on that just a little bit in the book because there's a state tax, and then in some states have inheritance taxes. So it's hard to kind of get into some of the weeds with that without putting some of our listeners to sleep. But if they dig into the book, I get into a little bit more detail about how the taxes work when someone dies.
Yeah. Yes, I read that. Wonderful. So I have a question. Like, let's say someone is watching and they don't have any of this. They don't have a trust. They don't have advanced directive, and they come to you and say, "Hey, where do I begin?"
Well, I think, Anna, it starts with having that conversation, first of all, with yourself about the reality of your own mortality, if you will. I remember one of my mentors saying back very early when I decided to go down this path of legacy planning, you first have to be able to have that conversation with yourself to be able to face your own mortality and that one day, hey, we're all going to leave here. When it comes to death, it's a very taboo topic. And so it's something that many of us are very uncomfortable with. So just it's your perspective, how you look. You're going to leave here. So having that conversation, first of all,
Yeah.
with yourself about, the seriousness of that you're going to leave here. There, we all are here for a certain duration of time, like you mentioned earlier. But how do I want my family to be provided for? What type of ancestor do you want to be? Right? How will those who think about you when you've passed on, how will they remember you? And a lot of times it has to do with how you had your affairs in order when you left, because death can be a very emotionally draining and also a very stressful situation as well. So having that conversation with yourself first, then having that conversation, if you have a significant other, with your significant other, and then reaching out to a qualified professional who can help you identify maybe certain sensitive areas and help you point out maybe some blind spots and some things that you haven't thought about when it comes to this important planning.
Yeah, I love that. Those conversations are definitely very difficult. But like you said, first have that conversation with yourself and accept that you're not going to be here forever. And then talk to your loved ones, family, maybe parents, your children, and figure out what it is or your spouse, figure out what it is that you want to leave and how you want to handle it. And then we'll call you to handle the rest. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. And my other question for you is that a lot of people go online. There's like all these services that charge $300 to do the write up of some, and they think it's cheaper and cheaper is better. A lot of times people think that. So, what do you say to that? Why not take this approach and save some money and instead of paying an attorney, going, to those um, smaller venues or online offerings?
Well, here's my response to that. The trick with DIY, the do-it-yourself approach, right now we're in the information age. There's artificial intelligence, there's all
Right.
these online platforms and softwares. And so with our busy lifestyles, it's so easy to try to maybe choose to what we may perceive initially to be the easy way out. Well, I'll just go online or have a document preparation service. The only problem is you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
And so there's a whole industry surrounded around what happens when somebody passes away. And most of that can't be covered in a form, template, or kind of, we call it the cookie cutter approach. You just fill out some template online and say, I'm married, I have 2 kids, I have a dog, and this is who it's all going to. Your estate and the things that you work for can be much more complex and much more nuanced than that. And there's several blind spots. How do you know that you're even doing it the right way? And unfortunately, we get the phone calls from the survivors that say, hey, well, why are we still going to probate court despite the fact that my parents have a family trust? And most of the time is that there were critical steps that were missed along the way. The parents had the right intentions at heart, but they just didn't know what they didn't know. They just didn't know the law, and they didn't know that certain contingencies and issues that could arise, what I call the common pitfalls that are involved here with estate planning. So I recommend save the DIY projects for your home improvement. If you want to remodel your bathroom, give a crack at it, right? Worst thing that happens if you mess up the remodel in your bathroom or your home, you're simply going to call in a contractor to fix it. But what happens when you mess up your trust, your will, when you don't get that right, and you've already passed away? It's too late.
There's no turning back.
There's no turning back.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I have a little story. Recently, because I do real estate, recently I had a friend actually reach out to me. His uncle passed and left them a house, fully paid off, was grandfather, it belonged to the grandparents, then the uncle. And it all went to him. But guess what? The trust was so done well that, he was able to get the home in no time. He represented himself. He learned about probate law, trust, and he represented himself. But it took him, because it was done so well, it didn't take that long for him to own the property fair and square. So that, I highly recommend hiring an attorney because it makes that much of a difference. And then I also know clients who, did it themselves, and the kids are still in probate court after 2 years. And it's just, a lot of money being lost for your loved ones. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it was Benjamin Franklin that said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that certainly applies here with estate planning. It's worth the investment to get it done the right way with a trusted professional. So that way even your children, if you have children, or your beneficiaries, if you use a firm, they can go to that firm to get guidance on how to wrap up your affairs if needed, if it's properly executed in the trust or a will. So there's several advantages in terms of, in addition to accountability, right? Having a licensed professional who you can hold accountable if something's not done the right way. So there's a plethora of advantages for having it done right the first time, because you may not get a second opportunity to do it the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for explaining that.
Absolutely.
On that same note, when a client comes to you for estate planning, is there 1 or 2 things that are the most important to estate plan, or is it mostly about making the pieces work together?
I say the latter, making the pieces work together. Because remember, when estate planning not only involves what happens when you ultimately pass away, but also incapacity planning, because that's often overlooked, but that can be one of the most expensive things that happens in this process. For example, your advanced healthcare directives and powers of attorney. We get phone calls from the second generation, the children, say, hey, my mom maybe has Alzheimer's or dementia. And we want to try to get a plan in place because it's getting worse. And unfortunately, we've had situations where 1 week they call, they schedule the appointment, and maybe the parent has some of the faculties there, and the very next week, just like that, they no longer have legal capacity to make decisions. They can't sign anything because they've lost the capacity. Had they operated, took action a little bit sooner, while the capacity was still there, it could save the family thousands of dollars, because now once the parent has crossed that threshold of mental capacity or legal capacity, we now have to get the courts involved. And whenever we get the court involved here in California, we talk about additional attorney fees, court fees, and now sometimes that those emergency steps to now take action for your parents could be thousands of dollars, several $1,000s more than an estate plan itself.
Right.
So it can even cost you more. Yes, exactly. Because now when there's an emergency, it's always almost always going to be more expensive after something has happened than if you take the proactive approach and get those affairs in order while your parents or grandparents still have the capacity to do so. So yes, not so to answer that question, not just thinking about what happens when you pass away, but also what could happen in your life that might render you incapacitated. So thinking along those two planes are very important when it comes to legacy planning.
Ah, okay, great. Thanks for that explanation. Um, One of the things I wanted to ask, like the type of people that you connect with, like myself, I'm a realtor. What kind of people should I recommend you to? Should we recommend you to, other than the regular, the layman who owns a state? What
Well,
kind of
there the
profession?
big well, the biggest myth out there that we encounter is that I don't have enough to get a plan in place.
Right.
And that's such a big myth or misconception because many of us, when we sit down to do the exercise with the families and individuals, we help them start marshaling and thinking about everything they have.
Mm,
It can be a simple life insurance policy, a $500,000, $700,000 life insurance policy. That's wealth. Now, it may not be wealth that you realize here during your lifetime, but if something happens, somebody's going to get a check.
right.
How would you like that check to be used? How would that check maybe pay for your children's college education? Help maybe a down payment on a home, right? Real estate. Real estate's expensive here in California. Maybe that life insurance policy, if it's placed in the trust, can be used for a down payment on your child's first home or pay for
Mm,
something for your grandchildren. So it's not about how much you have, but what you want to do with what you have. Your wishes and your choices, being honored. So with that being said, we don't have a minimum threshold for an income. There's some firms that say, hey, you have to have at least $1 million in assets or this or that, right? But we've had clients who have been who have come from very modest means, but they had just enough to take care of someone who they loved if something happened. A lot of times that comes from life insurance. It can come from 401k and investments, someone's savings. How do you want those resources to be allocated and
yeah.
used if something should happen?
Jewelry, jewelry, furniture, or whatever, that's been passed down in from
Sentimental.
families. Yeah, sentimental items. These are all
Mhm.
included in the trust. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my next question, why might a homeowner want to consider a living trust as a part of their estate plan, as opposed to a will?
Well, homeowners can be at a very high risk when it comes to passing away with property that's titled in their names. Because
Mm,
there's the law here in California that if your property exceeds a certain value and it's in your name when you pass away, it's going to go to probate unless you have that property set up in that living trust as
mm,
opposed to a traditional will. And
mm,
so homeowners could be at risk and subject to thousands upon thousands of dollars in fees because the probate process is not only a very lengthy process, being anywhere maybe from 6 to 24 months here in California, but it can also be very, very expensive. There's some clients that may realize six figures in
wow.
probate and attorney fees once it's all said and done, depending upon the value of the home at the time that they pass away. So homeowners should be very attentive to and tune in here very closely because if the home is in your name when you pass away, you could be subjecting your family to probate court. And probate, to explain what that is for our listeners and viewers, is simply litigation that's against your estate when you pass away for the benefit of your creditors first, and then whatever is left over to your heirs. So
Mm,
there can be a lot of hands in the pot, if you will, before your children or grandchildren or your spouse, in some cases, ends up actually receiving what you've set aside for them. So
So this is
homeowners, go
in
ahead.
case you have a will and not a trust, not a living trust. This is what you're explaining.
Well, there's two ways. There's a several ways that you can pass away. If you pass away and you have a will in place, okay, and you put your house in that will, you're actually raising your hand for the probate process because
Mm,
it's the probate court that determines whether your will is valid and kind of supervises the distribution of those assets, if you will. So there's a bit of misconception out there because you may have a will, but the will might not be the right plan for you. The
mm,
will is putting your family through that legal process.
Wow.
versus a trust that's set up the right way can help your family avoid the stressful and a time-consuming probate process. And of course, it's very expensive as well. And that's what we help families do. Well, I like to say in short, we help keep families out of court and out of conflict.
I like that.
Yeah, we can help keep your house out of court as well.
All right. So let's say I'm going to give you a scenario. Let's say I just got married. We don't have a house. We have like some life insurance and 401k. And we do it. What do? We do a trust and a will and a advance directive? What do we start?
Well, that's a great question, Anna. The great place to start, even for those who are starting off with a young family and maybe they don't have real estate yet, but they have other assets, those other assets can wind up in court,
Mhm.
even despite having what we call beneficiary designations. Because
Mm.
what you want to think about here is when we have a life insurance policy, a 401k, other than the spouse, who might we have as a beneficiary? Our children. And what if we're a young family that has children under the age of 18? Well, can your child who's maybe 10 years old receive $500,000 directly from you to them? No,
No.
the answer to that question is no. It must go through the court process. So now the court is involved. And so now the court has to put things in place to get those finances to your minor children. And that involves the probate process. And also, it's not about what just happens to your things, but now who will step in your shoes and raise your children?
Mm.
For example, if you and your significant other, you go out to dinner this weekend, and maybe it's date night, if you will, and the children at home are home with the babysitter. What happens if the two of you don't make it back from dinner? Who will then step in your shoes and raise your children? If you don't make that designation, now the court must decide who would
Wow.
step in and raise your kids. Now, I don't know about you. I don't think that as being a parent, I don't think the court is in the best position to ultimately really decide without
Right.
having all the information. But you can put your guardianship nomination into the court. So that way, that's going to carry a lot of weight because what you're telling the court is this is the person who I trust to raise my children until they're 18 in the event something happens to me and the other parent. So that's very much a part of the process when we're dealing with families that have children under the age of 18, not just how and when they'll receive certain assets, but who would step in the shoes to now raise that child in the event of your demise.
Well, that's really a good explanation. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Another thing, like let's say we, as the young family, we didn't have, and we did the trust, and now we bought a house. Where do we go from there? And the house is not in the trust. Do we start a new trust or do we add to the trust? Like, how does that work?
Well, most trusts are designed so that you can add property to them for the duration of your lifetime. And so several of our clients, they start off, they don't have a home. Maybe they just have life insurance and some of those other assets in the trust that are set up or designated where the trust is a beneficiary of those assets. But when they have that home now, it's very important to take that step to make sure that the deed, right, is set up in a way that it recognizes the trust. Because when it's simply in your name, that's one of the critical errors that's missed in this process. So you want to get with a professional, either an attorney or even with your lender. When you're in that escrow process, some of those lenders will ask you, do you have a living trust? You can let the lender know, hey, we have a living trust now, and instead of taking this property in our names, we'd like to maybe start off having this trust from the beginning in the name of the living trust.
Yeah.
So that's one
And
of the
they'll
most
figure
valuable
that out.
pieces of information that I can share with the audience here is not just having the trust alone, but making sure your assets are properly set up in a way to recognize the trust.
Yeah, I've done that before with clients where we had, they had a living trust and we sold something and then put the new home into the existing trust. So that was, a good learning curve for me as well when we started doing that kind of thing. If you have I have another question. If you have a will or trust and you pass away, will there be any paperwork involved?
Well, unfortunately, yes, there's always paperwork involved.
We love
It's
that.
just to what extent, right? And so the way in this country, unfortunately, nothing happens automatically, right? So there is going to be a little bit of a process that because let's say if you have that living trust, Well, how does that house, for you, we're talking about real estate here, how does that house end up getting passed down or conveyed to the children or to the beneficiaries? So a new deed may have to be prepared, right? What
Yeah.
about if there's a final tax return of the people that passed away? So there are some administrative things that need to take place, even when you have the most well thought out and drafted plan. There's always going to be some paperwork because now this is a generational wealth transfer. Now the car that you left to your child, that car was in your name. How does that car now end up in the name of your child? And this is where that trust administration process, if you will, this is where professionals can step in and help the beneficiaries or the trustee of that trust do some of that paperwork that needs to take place to now transfer ownership to those beneficiaries in that trust.
Great answer. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So what if I already have a estate plan? Do I need to do anything further, or am I set with having it done one time?
I wish I could tell you that this was a set it and forget it, a one and done experience. But one of the reasons why we call it a living trust is because it should grow and evolve as your life grows, changes, and evolves.
Mhm.
So, unfortunately, one of the number one ways that these plans fail is that they're old and outdated.
Mm.
Perhaps someone drafted a trust and the trust is 25, 30 years old and they never had it updated. Now, many of those assets that they initially started the trust with, maybe they got sold. Maybe
Mm.
there's grandchildren involved now. Maybe there's beneficiaries that have passed away. And so now your beneficiaries are having trouble because the trust is almost like it's obsolete, right? Maybe the
Mm.
laws have changed several times since you had your original trust drafted. What our firm does as well for folks who have taken that step, I commend you for taking the step to getting this done, is we do comprehensive estate plan reviews where
Wow.
we can take a look at your trust as we can look at 50 different points of vulnerability to help you determine whether or not your trust needs to be just maybe amended or maybe more significant changes need to be made to that trust. So it's like maintaining a car, if you will, right? When you purchase the car, even if you purchase the car brand new, well, what if you never change the oil, right? Well, how
Yeah,
long is that engine going to last if you
not
never
that
got
long.
the brakes repaired, right? So you want to think about that with your trust. We recommend every few years having it reviewed. We have things that we have in place for our clients to keep that relationship going. We provide complimentary reviews for our clients. So we have a relationship model that we want to keep in touch with you after your trust has been established because life is going to change. What can change? The laws can change, your
Right.
beneficiaries can change, your assets can change, your wishes can change. So
Yeah.
with that, all that being said,
Yeah.
why
Like
should
there's a
trust not
divorce
change with it?
or death in one of the family members, you got to replace,
Absolutely.
unfortunately, with another. There's always something coming up. Definitely. So, do my beneficiaries, another question I have is, as my beneficiaries designations on my life insurance and retirement accounts supersede my will?
Well, here's how beneficiary designations work. And those assets that you listed, they are classified as beneficiary designated assets.
Mhm.
And yes, because the reason why they supersede that will is because that's a contract that you have with that life insurance company, as you will. So,
Mm.
if you will. So, let's say you have a will where you say, all my life insurance proceeds is going to go to this particular individual, but you have a different beneficiary named on that contract, if you will, with that insurance company. That contract is going to hold up because the insurance company is not contracted with your will,
Right.
right? Your insurance company is contracted with you and the people who you have listed on your beneficiary designation. We've had several stories to where like a spouse maybe had a life insurance policy before they got married and they have like a sibling or someone else, a
Mm.
parent as a beneficiary. Then they get married and unfortunately they've passed away and now the spouse will call and say, "Well, how can we fight this?" Because
Right.
yeah, maybe he meant to have me as the beneficiary. I'm his wife or what have you, if you
Right.
will, or his spouse. And unfortunately, that beneficiary designation is going to prevail in most instances because it was up to that person to update that beneficiary designation before they passed away. And unfortunately, they didn't. So the insurance company is going to have to issue that check to the beneficiary that's identified on that insurance contract.
Wow, that's eye-opening. I didn't know
Mhm.
that. Interesting law. So the life insurance is separate from the trust and will, like, let's say we do
Absolutely.
the will and trust with you, but at my job 30 years ago, I put my brother. But now I'm married, I have a kid, I have kids, and I have a husband, and then the person passes, and then the life insurance goes to the brother.
Absolutely. Because how is the insurance company going to know otherwise? Because
Right.
now you passed away. How do we know that you did not intend for that? Right. So, so the insurance company doesn't want to get sued. The insurance company has to protect its interest as well. So, this is why estate planning with a professional is so important because how would you
You do
know
the review and you let them
to
know.
update this stuff if you're not working with a professional that sees these issues day in and day out?
Right.
And with my team and what I've done, I've seen these issues. So I know to ask the right questions when we're marshaling and gathering your assets at the beginning of the process. We can talk about how your beneficiary designations should be set up in a way that coincides with your estate plan and avoids probate and also alleviates these issues of having the incorrect person named as a beneficiary.
Well, that's really eye-opening. I'm glad we brought this subject up and talked about it because I feel like this is something actually that I am at fault with, with my 401k. Because when I started it, wow, yeah, I didn't have a kid. So now I have to make sure I fix that.
Absolutely. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's something that's very easy to overlook. And I'll share something with you, Anna. Well, a lot of times when folks come to us for the first time, the number one asset they're thinking about is in your line of work, a house, right? They're
Yes.
thinking about as long as I have this house, because the house is the largest asset in most folks' asset portfolio. But they
Right.
forget about, wait a minute, we have a few $100,000 over here in 401k. Wait a minute, we have a 500,000 life insurance policy over here. Maybe we have $30,000 in a bank account over here. Well, we have an investment account. And so all of these different things can be subject to probate. They can also be subject to being lost to the
Mm.
state if they're not
But
properly
not
accounted for
claimed.
within your estate plan.
Wow. If they're not accounted for or claimed in the will or living trust, they could be, yeah, lost forever.
They can be lost. Absolutely.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we see that.
That's sad. Um, let's say I live in a different state than some of my assets. Could this cause problems with probate? How can an estate planning attorney help?
Well, great question, Anna. It could actually cause a probate nightmare for you. So let's say your children live here and they're the beneficiaries of your will or your trust, whatever you put in place, and you own property in Arkansas. You have another house in Florida, and maybe you have a strip of land that you've inherited from your grandparents in New York. There's something called ancillary probate, right? Where you have that main probate process here in California, and then maybe your kids are having to open up probate in several other states.
Uh,
And so now just cha-ching, 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 right? Because now typically how the law works is that the state that where your property sits, that's going to be the controlling entity, if you will, over how that property gets transferred, right? Unless you have a trust or something set, because a trust that's set up here in California can manage and control assets in other states. Okay. And we show our clients how to get that set up so that you can have one trust that can basically manage all of your assets here in the United States. So you can be causing a nightmare and a financial drain on your estate simply because you didn't know that, hey, you knew that you had these other properties, but you didn't take the proper steps to make sure that your estate plan controlled those other properties. And if you don't have any estate plan at all, now we could be looking at several thousands and thousands upon thousands of dollars more in legal fees because now you're needing to hire an attorney in these other states to represent your family to get that property transferred.
wow.
So just kind of do the math, if you will. And
Yeah.
we could be talking about in the six figures with some families, well into the six
Yeah.
figures.
Do probate in every state. That would be crazy. That would be a nightmare. But you're saying if they put them in a living trust, then they can avoid all the probate
It,
courts and
it
all that.
It can be avoided, absolutely, and we show families how to do that, because it's one thing to just kind of talk about conceptually, but this is where our expertise comes in, because we have the resources and the connections, and we have to align your assets in a certain way, and many folks just don't know how to do that. It's intimidating for a lot of people to deal with different governments and different counties and recording processes. And our firm, we do all the heavy lifting, and so you can just rest assured that you have a firm that has worked in this capacity and can make sure that these different assets in other states are aligned with your estate plan.
That's an amazing answer. Thank you so much. This is so informative. So I have another question. How can we learn more about Legacy One Law Firm, and how uh, can we get started with this type of planning, like for the viewers?
Well, for the
How do we
viewers,
start with you?
great question. You can find us on the web at www.legacy1law. That's 3 words, legacy, the word one, O-N-E, law, L-A-W.com. And if you Google Legacy One Law Firm, you'll see our website there as well. We're one of the highest rated firms in the area for what we do, because we take pride in making sure our clients are satisfied with the experience. And so you can learn more about our website. We have a blog and a library on our website that tackles a lot of these questions. We even have a free masterclass that
Wow.
your viewers can sign up for by simply going to our website, and you'll basically put your email address, and it'll give you a link for an on-demand masterclass, which is hosted by me. It's recorded, which will give you the most common pitfalls and things to avoid when you're embarking on this journey of a family, estate, and legacy planning. So that's how they can learn more. They can also give me a call or call the firm to schedule a consultation. The number is 323-405-7017. Once again, 323-405-7017. And if there's some, not sure if you have show notes or things of that nature, but if we can provide those maybe to your audience after the fact, we'll be happy to answer any initial questions that any of your listeners or viewers may have. So please do reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation.
Definitely, I'll put it in the comments below, in the YouTube channel. Make sure everybody has access to your contact, and how and get started. And I love the fact that you have a masterclass. I feel like this is something it's an uncomfortable conversation, because nobody likes to talk about death. It's morbid.
It
But
is.
it's crucial. It's very crucial, because all the time in your life that you work so hard, the money you work so hard, it's sad to see it go in probate court, or to taxes and things that, and then your loved ones don't get to benefit from. If that's what you want to leave, you want to leave a family legacy. We always talk about leaving a family legacy. Kind of shows, validates our life, and not to say that if you don't have that big funds, that you're not validated, but at the same time, we want to be able to leave something for the people we leave behind. Or even, I know a lot of people that don't have a lot of family, they leave it to charity. There's, obviously that would go also through you guys, through the legacy law type of trust. And so it's important, and it's crucial that we prepare ourselves. Maybe it's a learning curve. So I loved having you here. I love that you were able to answer so many of my questions. I feel like we have a lot more to learn. Like, looking through your book, I see there are different types of trusts. And there's several, like the Clayton Election Trust, Probate Avoidance Trust. There's so many in here that, I'm not going to pretend to be an attorney and understand any of it. You obviously went to school to learn this. So, I'm not going to take any chances. And I recommend my audience not take any chances, depending where you are. You are licensed in California, correct?
Yes, we're only licensed here. Legacy One Law Firm is a professional law corporation, but I'm the attorney at the firm, and we're licensed only here at this point in time in the state of California. So we have clients no matter where they're listing from in the state. We have clients as far south as San Diego and San Francisco Bay, everywhere in between. So your clients don't even have to leave their living room if they're out of the area. Thanks to technology, we can serve clients, in San Francisco, and we can do your estate plan. We can do it all virtually. So you don't even have to leave your living room, sending everything to your home. So we have ways to kind of serve clients who don't live in the greater Los Angeles area.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. So any closing thoughts on your behalf? We're nearing the end of our show. There's only 2 minutes left, and I'd love to hear your closing thoughts. Anything, you and I talked about education, and one of the things on this channel I want to advocate for, it's off topic from law, is education, and especially yourself. Tell us a little bit about how education made a difference in your life.
Well, education for me was everything, because I didn't really have much of a vision in my early 20s. And I think what education did for me is it helped broaden my horizon with regard to different cultures, background, perspectives, some of the literature and books. One of the most impactful books that I ever read was the biography of Frederick Douglass, for example. And I read that book my first semester in college, and it was just a game changer for me, because it really helped me put in perspective the value of education, and how a lot of folks that looked like me once upon a time, it was illegal for them to even learn how to read.
Wow.
And so I realized that maybe I was taking things for granted as a younger man, and it really allowed me to become laser focused, to realize that I had such a privilege and the opportunity to be able to get an education. And I was a creative at first, but because I was able to focus and take my studies seriously, I was able to do more than just music, even though music is awesome. But my education allowed me to venture into other fields, such as law. I would have never thought in a million years that I would be an attorney. I thought that I would be making music somewhere. But having that education allowed me to pivot and to know that I had more options than just being a musician, although that's wonderful. But there were other things that I could do that my education afforded me the opportunity to do. And that's why I'm an advocate for higher education. I come from the higher education field as well, spending a number of years working in that field before becoming a lawyer. So I'm definitely an advocate for higher education, and being able to basically diversify your career options, if you will.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate all your knowledge, and really lovely having you here on the show. And I'm definitely going to keep in touch and have you back to answer more questions. Thank you. I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Anna. It's an honor and a privilege to speak with your audience and be on your show. Please do keep in contact.
Definitely. I appreciate you. So don't forget, my audience, don't forget to call our friend here, Sedric, at Legacy One Law. He will definitely help you with anything you need as far as trusts and wills go. Thank you.
Thank you.